For many people, the purpose of education and schooling are to learn new skills, master different areas of knowledge, engage with important material, make new friends, and be part of the American flower bouquet of diversity and inclusion. Throughout the course of this class, we have learned that the goals of schools vary based on ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. While many privileged schools in wealthy neighborhoods with mostly white students may share some of the same goals of education as previously mentioned, there are many schools with more diverse student bodies in impoverished neighborhoods that have vastly different goals. For instance, schools in poor areas are institutions that mold students to become cogs in an unequal economic machine. Schools are widely regarded as facilities where students become ready for the job force, but positions in this system vary by race, gender, and status. Rich white male students are molded to become the economic hegemon of society by learning yet new analytic and managerial skills. Every other student that does not fit this profile is shaped to become the former student's lesser. Bowles and Gintis observed that a special curriculum was developed for white elites, while vocational training was offered to students of color and immigrants in order to channel them into manual labor jobs. Many schools in areas lack resources and teachers that are willing to help students break the shackles of poverty, racism, and sexism. Furthermore, many schools in poor areas are designed to create a negative feedback loop of failing students that raise children only to be sent back to these same institutions that failed them in the past. Is this a problem of individual students? Surely there are handfuls of examples of students that have all the tools to succeed, and yet they squander their opportunities. However, the vast share of students in these failing schools are not given any opportunities, and they are failed by the ills of their society and not their individual efforts. Many scholars have discovered that the civil rights movement did not end racism or racist policies. Feminist scholar Bell Hooks acknowledges that desegregation did not bring social integration, and that we are still separated by white supremacist beliefs. I firmly believe that if rich students with a multitude of resources were to trade places with impoverished students from failing schools, we would see that these once successful students would be tremendously hindered. So, why do we assume that it is the students that are failing and not the society from which they come from? Why are we so quick to assume that people of color do not want to learn instead of examining the conditions that stand in the way of their opportunities? And why are we so quick to point out that schools with failing standardized test scores are not succeeding while simultaneously not giving them the funding and tools they need to uplift themselves? Race and economics have shaped our conceptions of how people are supposed to function in society without questioning the macro level conditions that create these outcomes. Under capitalism, it is the individual's responsibility to make their own lives better for themselves. This system not only lacks any empathy, but it also assumes that people exist within a vacuum of time. It assumes that the past of bigotry, racial segregation, homophobia, and gender discrimination is over and done with, and that the present is the only circumstance that stands in the way of success and failure. There could be no justice for these maladies without 1. Recognizing that they happened and are still happening, 2. Acknowledging that they can still influence current relations and ideologies of today, and 3. Taking active steps at dismantling oppression that exists today. I want to become a teacher because of my interest in history and social studies. I want my students to understand that our current condition is a symptom of a combination of social, economic, and historical outcomes. I want people to realize that everything happens for some reason and that it is the result of how history has played out. In Hebrew, the word for history is yizkor, which literally means memory. Without paying proper credence to this memory, we are doomed to forget it and replicate it in a more covert yet equally ruinous fashion. Additionally, without interacting with this history as an active part of our collective memory, we are doomed to make certain experiences and phenomena insignificant. It is a criminal act to do such a thing. I want to teach because of my deep love for bettering our society through educating our youth. Nieto proclaims that teaching out of love includes a blend of confidence, faith, and admiration for students and their strengths. Every student deserves this treatment. Moreover, I want to be a teacher because I want to interact with children and influence them to question their society and take interest in how the world has been shaped. I love to frequent museums because I see it as a gateway to a past life. Is this something that is foreign to people who do not fit the dominant culture of society? Is this a concept that is unknowable to women or gender nonconforming people? Is this a concept that is considered unlearnable for students of color? Is this a concept that is lost in translation with students who are immigrants? Is this a concept that can only be relatable if you are straight and cisgender? This is a concept that you can only understand if you live in a certain neighborhood and have certain material wealth. Surely these questions are entirely bogus. But why is it that our society believes that these questions are valid? I contend that anyone can be interested in history and reliving, reimagining, and reinterpreting events and theories of the past. The problem is that people do not have access to this information or are told that they will never have access to it. This mindset is entirely criminal, and to subject marginalized people under the yoke of poor education is equally criminal as well. Education policy is at the forefront of all these issues. The way schools are segregated through white flight into the suburbs and improper funding for diverse schools fuels a machine of injustice. Understanding that funding for schools with opportunity gaps is a crucial first step to dismantling this malady. Latza Billings highlights that school funding is based on property taxes, with rich white neighborhoods receiving most of the funding, while poor schools use their money to fix their dilapidated buildings. Rich schools use their money for books, smartboards, laptops, and other supplies. School choice is one of the leading culprits of this gap. Studies from Yoon and Lubiensky, Nicole Hannah-Jones, and Denise and Gross all conclude that both white and parents of color are sensitive to the racial outlook of schools. White families flee to the suburbs to well-performing schools, while families of color send their kids to city schools that lack the funding and qualified teachers because they are more racially diverse. Additionally, when families of color come to white neighborhoods, they face backlash from white families that is nothing short of dog whistle racism. Schools are a place to recognize our own space in relation to others, according to Union Lubiensky. Recognizing that U.S. law is based on property rights and not human rights will help us understand that schools are used as a sorting mechanism to advance rich white men while holding back everyone else. Hence, a neoliberal approach to school choice is short sighted because it neglects the needs and rights of low income families' education preferences. So, what can I do as a teacher? I aspire to use my platform to inspire students to think for themselves and question our world. Moreover, I want students to closely examine the influence of racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti Semitism, and socioeconomic inequality and how it interplays with society. Similar, Similarly, I want students to learn to disavow these evils actively and be allies to each other through solidarity and mutual aid. As a white man with a high degree of economic privilege, I want to use my opportunity to preach and perform anti racism in the classroom and foster a loving and accepting environment. Hooks formulates that white people must be free of the will to dominate on the basis of race, so that we can bond with people of color in beloved community, living the truth of our essential humanness. I want to be an ally to Jewish students who is a role model that understands their experiences and needs. I want to be an example for queer students who advocates to them that their feelings are valid and to be supportive of their presentation and preferences. Most importantly, I want to use my platform to be an accomplice to people of color and to teach them that the society's treatment and representation of them is entirely criminal. James Baldwin asked teachers that they teach African Americans that their condition is criminal and that it must be resisted to change society for the better. Teacher candidates. We occupy an important space as educators, role models, allies, and comrades to these students. We must use this power and knowledge to inspire students to look within themselves to find meaning and tackle the atrocities of our society as a united team. Not doing so would be a disservice to the children and future generations. Hooks asks that we form a conscious cooperative partnership that is rooted in mutuality. Let's go out and empower students with the skills that they need to be accepting, aware, considerate, and successful actors in our community. L'chaim.